Good evening and happy Monday. I hope you all had a restful and holy weekend. I know I certainly did. I have the opportunity to be on vacation this whole past since Wednesday at an undisclosed location at a cabin in Minnesota. But I brought the old laptop along, and we are going to talk about whatever we're going to talk about today. But to start off with, I have a confession to make. I have finally succumbed to Mr. Mark Lefebvre, friend of the channel, his continual naggings and urgings to read the books of Nassim Taleb. And if you spend long enough with Mr. Lefebvre, you will have heard about Taleb and about how wonderful his books are. And I am delighted to report that he isn't actually exaggerating anything. That I found just the first few chapters of his book, Anti-Fragile, to be very illuminating and, especially in the sense that it is helping me draw connections to these things. So let's talk about a little bit about what he means by anti-fragility and what I have been connecting with that in my reading. So you can kind of have three different categories of things. They're not going to be necessarily perfect categories, but they're close enough. You could have things that are fragile, things that when they are shocked or when they experience chaos are likely to break. That's fragility. We've got a very simple notion of that. We encounter it all the time. You could think of fine china as being something that's fragile. In kind of a middle category, we've got something that's robust, something that is strong and is going to be able to resist a certain amount of force. However, the force that is put upon this thing is not going to make it stronger. The force that is put on whatever thing it is that we're considering may just be absorbed by it, or the force could actually damage it some way. So we could think of something that's robust, like a steel beam. Let's say it's a steel beam. It's fairly new. It doesn't have any degradation to it. You can apply an awful lot of force to that. It won't bend easily. But if you apply enough force to it, or if you apply enough chronic forces to it, it will begin to bend and deform and lose some of its structural integrity. So both of those things are very familiar to us. We can bring up all sorts of artifacts, and we can categorize them as fragile or robust, and that's fairly familiar to us. But we don't actually have a word for anti-fragility until he invented it. It's a neologism, if you like, a new word that he invented. But there isn't any word that he was able to find that describes anti-fragility well. What anti-fragility is, if an object has a property of anti-fragility, that means that a certain amount of chaos, a certain amount of stress, and a certain amount of shock is actually going to make that thing stronger. Now, of course, we've got to say a certain amount. Something that's anti-fragile won't necessarily be able to stand up to literally anything, but it will, with a certain amount of shock, a certain amount of chaos that it encounters, with a period of recovery, will grow stronger from that exertion, from that shock, from that chaos. And so it's very difficult to come up with an artifact, something that's man-made, that has the property of anti-fragility, at least in the terms of a physical object. So probably the closest thing that you're going to get, and the most immediate thing you're going to get, is the human body, or any healthy body, probably for that matter. That our human bodies are not designed for a life of nonstop leisure. That we need to have a certain amount of contention, a certain amount of strife and striving, a certain amount of chaos in order to be properly healthy. So you can imagine that's kind of what exercise is. The more varied and vigorous the exercise is, the more your body will adapt to that. Your body has this property of anti-fragility, assuming that it is healthy, that it's not in some process of irreversible decay there. So when I go to the gym
and I start, picking up weights and all of the that sort of thing, my body responds by thinking, "Oh boy, we several times a week I have to move very heavy things. I should get stronger so that I can do that more efficiently in the future." It's almost like there's a final cause or an instinct for final cause in our very flesh, but never mind that. So we've got these three different categories: fragility, that'd be like china; robustness, that's like a steel beam; and anti-fragile, a healthy body that, when it is faced with stress and rigors, actually becomes stronger. So the first thing I thought is that you should look at something like the church and be able to find anti-fragile features in it. If we're going to take our Lord seriously when he says that the church is his body, right? Then maybe we should be able to see some anti-fragile features. And I'm sure that I could come up with a whole bunch of different things, but we're just going to start with one thing to look at tonight: the church and the anti-fragility. And I look at the doctrinal system of the church, the way that we come to know the truth about who God is and who we and all creation are in relationship to him. And I think that is a robustly anti-fragile system. If you look at the history of the doctrinal development of the church, you'll find that the most fruitful investigations and the way that the whole thing actually proceeds is by people having bad ideas. So we've got a very clear notion of the divinity of Christ. We could say that he is, consubstantial, co-equal, co-eternal with the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. We've got a very strong sense of that. If you're a Catholic, that comes as a part of your education in the creed and in the basic doctrines of who Jesus is. We didn't come up with those formulations until Arius and the Arian party in mostly Alexandria began to advance an alternative way of understanding who Jesus was in a very effective way. Their Arian doctrine that Jesus was merely the highest of all creation and not the co-eternal begotten Son of the Father was a strong presence in the church. And the Arian crisis in certain places lasted well into the 5th century. So it wasn't like we banged out the Council of Nicaea in 326 and that was done, right? So certainly those decades in which the church was being torn apart by this question, which there was quite an intense debate over this question, were not fun to live through. Ask St. Athanasius about how many times he got exiled from Alexandria and all of those different things. Nevertheless, the very posing of the question to the church made it so that we could actually come to an answer, and that we could formulate that answer in such a way that it would be easy to pass on, right? You heard me rattle off a little section of the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed there. I've had that memorized since I was a kid because we say it every week at Mass. All of these things are a system, a result of the anti-fragile doctrinal system that exists in the Catholic Church. That when it is challenged, eventually we get to the truth. We get to the bottom of things. We could look at all sorts of examples. I'll try not to talk all night about this, but maybe I could. We could look at the Donatist controversy. The Donatists were a sect in northern Africa in the late 4th and into the 5th centuries. And they taught that the rites and the sacraments performed by fallen clerics were not valid. That if a priest had at some point committed a serious public sin, that he was no longer able to offer the Eucharist or to baptize validly. That error called forth a response from one of the great minds of the church, St. Augustine. And St. Augustine is the one who laid down the fundamental building blocks of the sacramental system as we understand it to this day in his anti-Donatist writings. You can see the same thing with the church's understanding of grace with St. Augustine's anti-Pelagian writings, right? We could go on and on and on about this. At the time of the Protestant Revolution, the Protestants were challenging what the notion of the church means. If you try and study that question in the Summa, St. Thomas Aquinas dedicates 10 articles to it, and it's a good 10 articles, and you can find an awful lot in there. But we've now answered that question. What does it mean for the church to be a church? With much more sophistication and much more precision, we've developed these tools in response to these questions. And over the centuries, our capacity for handling doctrinal development has built up a lot of redundancy. So you can see this in a lot of apologetics discourse. There's a big focus on the magisterium, right, of the bishops in union with the Roman pontiff, and that being one of the Catholic distinctives there. And it is a Catholic distinctive, and it does deserve a little bit of attention. And certainly, the bishops have a solemn duty to uphold these teachings. But that is not the only place where Catholic doctrine gets its strength and gets its robustness from. Certainly the priests who are not bishops, who are faithful to the church and wish to do well, will be a source of doctrinal integrity for the church. They'll be able to uphold the church's doctrine. The universities have become their own kind of locus of authority that has some sort of interesting canonical relationship with the magisterium, and you'll find faithful Catholics teaching there who can offer another buttress and another support for the truths of the Catholic faith. We could look at our liturgies, right, and you can understand the faith in practice when we look at our liturgies, not just in the Western Rite, but we can also look to the practices of the Eastern churches and find certain truths of the faith contained and defended in there. The canon law has got a very long tradition, and it has its own mechanisms for doctrinal development, for doctrinal correction, and doctrine embedded inside of the canons there. So you can find certain canons in the Code of Canon Law that are just theological and that give a setting for, what is the Eucharist, what is marriage, what is a priest, all of these sorts of things. The writings of the fathers are another locus of theological authority. And, if there's a consensus among the fathers on a point, it is actually considered to be infallible by the church. That's another locus of infallibility even. And even the lay faithful, right, those who hold no particular office or authority inside of the church. The church teaches that the whole body of the church will never err. And it's not something I've studied all that carefully, but I've heard that the Council of Ephesus, which affirmed the divinity of Christ and the title of Mary as Mother of God, was in large part buttressed by the piety and prayers of the faithful, that the lay faithful had been praying to Our Lady in these terms for decades, maybe even over a century at that point. And that was seen as evidence of this title having apostolic roots, and therefore we cannot just dispense with these things. So not only is the church's doctrinal system anti-fragile because it grows stronger when it's challenged, but it also has developed redundancies, and redundancies, according to Taleb, are a hallmark of a anti-fragile system there, that it can survive these things, shocks and these things. So perhaps you look around the world today, perhaps you see doctrinal movements that you are unhappy about, that you see people challenging things which were supposed to be settled doctrine, and why are we talking about this again? we're in the middle of another one of these chaotic periods where there is a great flowering, fruitfulness, especially in the understanding of marriage and human sexuality and reproduction and these sorts of things. These questions are being asked right now, and the church is becoming stronger, even though it is sometimes a bit painful and chaotic to go through. The church is becoming stronger and coming up with new ways of understanding a more profound delve into the doctrine that we have from the beginning. Because how does it get more anti-fragile than a man who is not only rises from the dead, but comes back with a glorious resurrected body? He is our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Has to be anti-fragile, right? Because they tried to kill him and it didn't work. That's all I've got to say about that. And I figured it wouldn't be long before you would be on here to celebrate your great victory in inducing me to read books.
Certain books, yeah.
Certain books,
this is great. I got Vanderklay to read American Nations, and of course he benefited greatly. And I've gotten you to at least start your Taleb journey. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I didn't, of course, make that last connection. Shame on me. Yes, the ultimate anti-fragile case that probably should have been made from the beginning. Yeah, I love Taleb stuff.
And we've got Layman Zerger joining us tonight. You've taken on a new name.
I have. Don't let me interrupt you.
What's the reference?
It's Lyman Zerga from was it Ocean's 13? He's like one of the characters in the heist takes on this false identity. He's like a mesh of like 5 different nationalities, so you couldn't really pin the accent. But yeah, he's supposed to be like an arms dealer or something like that. But no one really knows what the character is, and so I was like, oh yeah, Layman Zerga. There we go. It was my grand re-debut now that volleyball season is over and I can haunt Father Extremes again.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you on. It's good to see you. It's been a little while since we've managed to connect, so yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who are just upset at dissent within the church, especially on things that should be settled doctrine. And it's like, yeah, it's actually really good news that over time, and with a divine guarantee, this will actually make the church stronger. I just thought of another example, right? The one of the hugest problems that the church faced in the Middle Ages was bishops holding multiple sees so they could get multiple streams of income, right? And like the Protestant Reformation and the response to that has basically solved that problem. Like there was a massive, hundreds of years widespread problem that nobody could solve. And like the response to the Reformation, like wiped that out. So it's like, just hold on, guys. This could be tough, but yeah.
Well, I think the big advantage to his books is the perspectives that he's giving you on each of, because he's covering more than one topic per book, but he's covering one main topic per book, which is roughly the title. And I started with Fooled by Randomness because at the time I was doing a lot of stock market research. Oh shoot, that reminds me, I got to start a bunch of stuff off at some point. Black Swan wasn't out. Mm-hmm. No one knew who this guy was. No one. Mm-hmm. No one read Fooled by Randomness except the stock market guys, because that book is heavily stock market leaning. Mm-hmm. And that's, it's good if you're into numbers, right? Because you can really dig in and go, oh, I see how this works in charts and things, because all that's in Fooled by Randomness. And then between that and Black Swan, you start to get the idea for how, with these different perspectives, not only do you get a better sense of time, but you get a better sense of how time is not at all linear in terms of our experience. And so, like, at one point...
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there, right? So I've never gone backwards. So, like, I just want a little more exposition on the statement our time is not at all linear according to our experience.
Yeah. So we don't experience time linearly at all. Right. Because sometimes you get stuck in the past. Well, how did that happen? Right. Right.
And that's the ways you can get stuck in the past is like you might, have had a bad experience with the end of your last relationship. And like now you just decide that you're either going to just pine for that relationship that ended badly and like not move forward. Like that could be a real way that you could get stuck in the past.
Right. Right. Or you could, I mean, there are people, in fact, I was dealing with one the other day, completely locked in and couldn't do anything now because they were recounting not deep past stuff and not the same stuff, but they kept reanalyzing everything. And I'm like, you can't reanalyze things. No. Right. So like people don't sort of understand, like you can't know the whole of another person because that would require your lifetime plus their lifetime plus processing time, right? Like it's not even double, it's more. Right? That's the nonlinearity problem, is that processing is an issue, right? And the other issue that he points out is this whole thing about the Gaussian versus the Cauchy distribution, and that's the Pareto principle, right? That's all. That's why when Peterson said it, I'm like, bro, you should have read Taleb. Like he had this nailed a long time ago.
He was doing psychology, you can only read so much.
True. And then what actually ends up being the case is that, and Taleb, I forget which book it's in. It might be in Anti-Fragile, but I don't think so. It might be in one of the others. But he makes the point that like small groups are what move the world. The masses don't move the world at all. Right, because the mass, by definition, are followers, and they have to be. Like the world wouldn't work any other way. And so, the example that he gives is he was at like some kind of catered event, and his Jewish friend was there, and he was like, "Oh, he knows that basically he's practicing," and he's like, "Oh, I don't know what food I can get you." He's like, "Oh, you can get me a drink." And he's like, "How do I know what drink to get you?" And he's like, "All drinks in the U.S. are kosher. They're all blessed, every single one of them." And he was like, "What? The Jews are like 13% of the population. There's no way that all the big companies decided to." No, they did.
I think it's a little easier for beverages, right? Like I've heard about kosher slaughtering, and that's a huge pain in the butt. But
well, there's fewer beverage companies.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's a consolidated market too.
It's a consolidated market, right? But think about the implications, because you can see the implications actually if you've ever been to stores that have a kosher section and non-kosher section. Imagine if they did that for beverages, how expensive that would be. But the number of beverages total in lifetime is nothing compared to the number of foods, especially prepared foods. Now you're talking about combinatorial explosion again.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's real easy to solve with beverages. And so it's solved with beverages because it's relatively inexpensive. And the expense of doing it the other way around, because the world is asymmetrical, which is something that Anti-Fragile and the three buckets, sort of shows you pretty clearly. That makes it all make sense. And so it's like, right. And then once you see the world that way, now you can understand a whole bunch of things that never made any sense before, including why there's an elite class. Right? Like I was watching a commercial today, and I was like, this commercial is like one of the actors is just god awful. But it's like that person was chosen because of who they know, not because of what they can do. Like the meritocracy only works within your class. Right. It doesn't work outside of your class, because your part of your class is determined by who you can meet, right? Like who you can shake hands with. We need a person for a commercial. Okay.
It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing, right? So like, who do you know that smokes?
Right.
It's like that is now a class marker, right? Like smoking cigarettes specifically, right?
It's
Smoking a
back to
pipe
doing
is
that.
a very different thing than smoking a cigarette, and it's like you go to the upper classes, you know, like that's now a class marker. You know, the upper classes don't have the Winstons.
It was the other way around before.
Right, yeah. It's so
I'm watching Danger Man or Secret Agent Man, depending upon whether the UK title or the US title.
Mhm.
And it's black and white, and they're offering cigarettes on the plane.
Mhm.
And it's like, what? Cigarettes on a plane?
You know, past is a foreign country.
The stewardess is offering you the free cigarettes that the plane has.
They don't want a
for
bunch
you
of
to smoke
people
while you're in the air.
getting antsy for their next hit of nicotine while they're 30,000 feet up, right? Like it makes perfect sense.
Right. Or if you watch Mad Men or something, you start to see where that crumbles and how that all falls apart. And yeah, that whole intermediary structure, that's what I've been studying lately, is the intermediary structures that sort of caused all the problems. So now I'm on the chase for Prussia. And I've just, like, the stuff I found out today is so disturbing. It just, I know some people insist that, Luther's getting out soon. And I'm like, man, this guy's got another few thousand years to go, because Prussia alone, which is entirely his fault. Well, not entirely. The roots of Prussia are much older than Luther, but Prussia went nuts as a result of Luther. And that, see, the problem with that is, you want the myth of World War II. Well, my friend, have I got a story for you? And boy, is it all wrapped up in the Protestant catastrophe, and in a way that I didn't even have any idea. And the funny part is, so I go looking for this, and because I read things like Taleb, I notice instantly that Wikipedia is hiding something. Like, you can just see it. I'm like, wait a minute. And then everyone, even on the Discord, they're all pissing me off. They're going, well, yeah, German. And I'm like, Germany doesn't exist this far back. What are you guys talking about? German? There is no German in the 14th.
There was a bunch of different local dialects that had some
Germanic language.
Yeah, they had grammatic similarities, but Luther's Bible is the one that standardized the German language.
That's right, but it's Luther plus the Teutonic Order,
okay.
the corrupted Teutonic Order from Frederick I is basically a pagan who gets put in charge of a Catholic order that was already in severe disobedience against the church. But then this guy basically takes over, and the minute Luther does what he does, he basically creates Prussia from nothing. I mean, it was already there, but like, he creates it like as a nation. And so, because I was tracking the corruption of the nation state, obviously, or the modern idea of country, because it's not just Napoleon that doesn't quite cut it, because Napoleon wasn't using countries in that way. He was still doing the kingdom model, but it's Prussia. It's absolutely Prussia. Just from what I found out today, and I'm not done.
So should we presume that there'll be another video with Adam coming out soon? Or is he too busy with his nuptial preparations?
Yeah, Adam already owes me a video about Otto von Bismarck, which is one step after, right? Bismarck's the modern German state. I already knew that, but that's not even the problem. The problem is, the mantle of Germany is what we're carrying on, and subsequently what Europe is copying. Now, I don't know how many people actually understand that. It is so clear to me that it's hard to imagine everybody doesn't know that, but whatever. I know they don't. Fair enough. It is kind of hard to see. But before, like, I was trying to figure out, well, what happened, but like, where did this Germany and like Reich and all this nonsense come? Because it's all nonsense. Well, it's all pagan heresy stuff, right? From the pagan influence into Prussia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, well, now this, like, that totally makes sense. It's like, this is pure paganism come back into the world to cause a war. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That fits the pattern perfectly. Mm-hmm. You see that pattern all over history, but you don't really see it at that layer, because in order to look at that layer, first you have to know there are layers, and boy, Taleb really helps you with that, or at least he really helped me to be able to talk about it. But once you start to see the asymmetries and realize how they work in this pyramidal structure, I can't continue playing my animation until midnight, but I might actually have it done tomorrow. Until you see the pyramidal nature of these hierarchies, and then figure out how they work in terms of momentum, nothing in history or any of the things that are going on actually makes a lot of sense. But once you get Taleb's stuff and you start to realize the importance of things like fooling by randomness and black swan and anti-fragile and skin in the game, it's like, oh wow, okay, the way the world works becomes a little bit more clear, and you can really sort of collocate some of the things that were, we'll say, mysterious or unknown or whatever, a lot better. It may not make you happier or feel more empowered, but at least you can have some sort of predictive power over what.
Well, if you want to feel happy, you should just pray the rosary. So that'll bring, maybe not happiness, maybe that's not the perfect word for it. It will bring you a measure of peace, and maybe that's as much as we can. Yeah, he's got his rosary right there. I'm no more than 5 feet from mine. So
if not for the rosary, I would have had probably like 12 nervous breakdowns last week.
There's another one over there.
It's just, it's more than just structure, but even if you do the dumb psychology layer of analysis, like there's just such a difference, even if that's all you have. And that's not even like 10%. But I mean, again, like if there was someone that was just picking it up because they were, some pagan trying to do de-stress stuff, like that itself would make an enormous difference.
That's what makes you anti-fragile is structure, like the nature of structure, and the fact that you can put, we'll say, work into the structure and revivify it is what, or at least one of the things, maybe the only thing, maybe not, that creates anti-fragility.
Interesting. So when we look at that, like anti-fragility in the church's doctrinal system, so you're looking at the structure of the church. When we look at something like the hierarchy of orders, and then the different ways that all of I laid out like 8 different things, 8 different ways that the church's layers of redundancy in the church's doctrinal structure, but they all have relationships to each other, right? So canon law is a product of the magisterium and trying to govern these things. Sacred art and liturgies are connected to each other. The universities have a distinct sort of connection to the magisterium and the lay faithful. The writings of the fathers of the church are like in the background of everything because we have to come from somewhere. So it's these structures aren't as simple as like an A-frame house. The different and I'm trying to get his vocabulary down. Is that complexity or complicatedness?
Which one?
Just the whole nexus of the different types of relationships between the different parts of the doctrinal system.
Oh no, that would probably be complexity.
Yeah, so that it's complex, and that like part of it can fail and the whole will survive. And then the rest of it will come to the rescue there. Although it may be really, really bad for a time, so I'm not going to run away from that.
The point is not that there's no damage. So I think the correct thing to give as an example, I think Taleb gives 2 examples if memory serves. I've only read the books twice. Unfortunately, I need to read them all again. The example he gives is bone, and if you're a martial artist, you already know about this. If you like wrap your fingers on the table every day for like 10 years, you can't break them anymore because your bone reforms stronger as the result of that activity. And there's some rather famous guys who have done that, right? And the other example is muscles, right? You make small tears in the muscles, right? So in the bones, they break and they reform and they break and they reform and they break. In the muscles, they tear and they rebuild. They tear and they rebuild. They tear and they rebuild. So probably the key to anti-fragility is caring. You have to care about it. It has to be in a structure.
Right. Well, certainly
Right. And
we could take the Arian crisis, for example, right? Like Saint Athanasius cared. He cared a lot. He got his butt exiled 6 times over this thing. He did not give up. He did like every, like some of it's kind of like, New York mafia stuff every once in a while, right? Like he was not an easy, he was the right man for the job, but he wouldn't necessarily been, just wild times, especially Alexandria. The more I hear about it, it's just a wild city. But he really cared about doctrinal integrity and the tradition of the fathers and the identity of Christ, and so he just kept at it and got the Council of Nicaea, and then the Cappadocian Fathers. They would have taken up the banner there, and would have carried a lot of that through. Frankly, improving on Athanasius's work there. So it's it's the caring is the only way any of this happens. And when we look at our like I think of so let's take the contraceptive and Humanae Vitae thing, because that's a hot topic nowadays, and a lot of good was done by Dr. Janet Smith, who just went out, an American laywoman. She just began giving talks about why Humanae Vitae is actually outrageously and exceptionally correct, like back in the 90s. And, her caring about this is what really did change a lot of people's minds. Like, people were just like, well, the church is just old fashioned on that. They'd listen to her talk and it would awaken something in them. So it's, the caring. Well, I can't imagine it working in the church without people caring enough to go do it. So,
it reminds me, as you were in the monologue talking about the anti-fragility thing, the thing that came for me was there's a point, it's actually one of my favorite lines in St. Faustina's diary, where she goes and she visits the oldest, most pious, holy nun that all the young nuns respect. She's known for being very peaceful and everything. So she goes and she checks on this old sister and says, asks her how she's doing. And the older nun goes to her and says, "Sister, old age does not excuse you from the combat." And I'm like, yes, it's just so good. And I'm like, yeah, that is anti-fragile right there.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mess with an old nun with a mandate from the Holy Father himself. It's
yeah. I love the, I see this a lot, especially in my own research and reading and everything like that. The thing of the redundancies being a hallmark of anti-fragility in a structure. I think of this just with just how many different saints there are, and how you have a few that are kind of, even you get like the same patronage with like a bunch of different people, or you get overlapping patronages. There's like, Italy has how many patrons, and all these things.
How many patrons of Europe are there?
Yeah, there's so many, but it's like they're never enough, right? And then you also get the thing of, you talked about like the church fathers' writings being in the background of all this stuff. And so you have a lot of things that seem to be new right now, like even as you mentioned, and it's one of the things that's caught my eye in the recent years is like the flowering of this understanding of marriage, as a sacrament and not just as something, like recently I heard that, it was always taught in the church, but the concept of like love in marriage in France was a very new thing at the time of King Louis IX in the 1200s, right? Like he was like a groundbreaker. His own mom who was a very holy, prayerful woman, was actually scandalized at the fact that he married for love and not for like status and alliance and those sorts of things. And she was like actually kind of amazed that he allowed her to actually do anything aside from just like raise the kids. And they had sort of a similar setup to like the Davidic kingdom. So like the mom was also the queen mother at the time in France. But I see this sort of thing, you have stuff that's extremely recent that caught my attention, like Saint Teresa of Lisieux's parents in 2015 were canonized as one saint, not two separate saints.
Right. So
And
unlike Isidore and his holy wife Mary, who had two different separate canonization ceremonies,
right,
they were canonized together as a couple.
right. And that was something that was like, oh, that was so interesting to me, because you look back at St. John Chrysostom's letter to a young widow, and he called it in like the 300s. Like, he basically said that this was a thing. It wasn't made canonical until 2015. But it's like, that was the type of thing. It was always there. Like, it was there the whole time. But it wasn't made official until right around the time that you're getting this much attack on not just institution, but like even the relationship itself and the roles, and I mean, just the graces involved and all that stuff. It just so happens that it's like, okay, guys, like another one for me that I was super stoked about is you've got like Divine Mercy Sunday, right? Huge devotion. A lot of people somehow still don't know about it. And you have this thing where it's like, oh, this is a new devotion, all this stuff. It's actually not. Like, St. Augustine wrote about it. It was called the Sunday in White back, again, in the 300s. And it was actually the same devotion, basically, with the same graces. And it was actually known at that time. It's just the ball got kind of dropped. And I've kind of talked about this on Mark's channel a bit, of this thing of, and we've kind of both discussed that sometimes like a ball gets dropped, and then it's been so many generations that like the people at this point don't even know that there is a ball to pick up until something major winds up happening. And then you get the attention. It's like, where did this all come from? And it's like, no, it was there the whole time. You just didn't see it.
Yeah, a lot of people attribute things, well, like the Council of Nicaea, to the wrong immediate cause, right? Or the wrong material cause, or the wrong cause altogether, because they don't understand these principles. And like the other thing is, what anti-fragile means is the more efficient something is, the more fragile it is.
Yeah.
It's like really important, because we've got a bunch of people running for efficiency left, right, and center. And I'm like, guys, there's a reason why that doesn't last ever. And they're like, no, we'll adjust the efficiency as we go along.
I mean, we literally saw this with the toilet paper. You guys remember the toilet paper?
Yeah.
That was a very efficient toilet paper delivery system. We get one black swan event, and all of a sudden, nobody has toilet paper, right? And like, we're having mass hysteria in the grocery stores when people are trying to, like hoard it. When, like if you really needed to, you could just get a washcloth. It's not my favorite. I don't do that, but it would get the job done. So
it's interesting you sort of mention Alexandria, Holy Land, but the downfall began in, I think, in 636 with the rise of Islam, particularly under Khalid bin Khalid bin Walid, I think his name was, where he was known as the Sword of Allah, with the conquering of today's Holy Land, Palestine, Judea, Syria, Antioch, Turkey, Egypt, Algeria. They were all, we mentioned, Alexandria and Saint Augustine, all Christian lands, and a lot of people forget that the history that was all Christian, i.e., the various councils and etc., all in the Middle East, which is 98% demographically speaking Islamic. And then you got the progression in historical sense, penetration of Europe through Spain right up to Leon, and King Philip driving all the Islam from Spain via Gibraltar, and they went the other way around through Turkey. And the Ottoman Empire took over the invasion, the biggest battle which saved Europe was the Battle of Lepanto, I think, the biggest naval battle.
Mhm.
And if that didn't happen, and it's interesting, especially people who are not so much informed in history, Europeans, so-called pseudo-intellectuals, self-hating people in America, Australia, Europe, and all that, say, how dare you about the Crusades, talking about fragility, the Constitution, the masculine culture of which was being proud of one's religion, one's culture, etc., heritage, which the West, unfortunately, we have lost. I'm sort of painting a broad picture. And then the two battles, the famous battle is at the gates of Vienna. Mehmed II, I think
September 11th, 1612, right?
1612 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that fell, I mean, so they failed in France, in Spain to penetrate Europe, to Islamize Europe, so they went the other way around, and right at the gates of Europe. I mean, if that fell, totally different. We wouldn't be. We'd probably be saying and speaking in Arabic at the moment. But anyway, it's not being disparaging against the other people or religions, but that's a historical fact.
I mean, yeah, and
being
historically, it's hard to escape the conclusion that these are just incompatible civilizations, right?
proven.
Because I don't know if there's ever been an empire that's been able to have the two together, right? You could look at the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was able to subjugate all sorts of people. It was able to subjugate the
Germans,
a few of the Gauls, but like the Carthaginians, who were their bitter, brutal enemies, they were able to subjugate them eventually. And so, if you can have an empire, and like empire properly speaking, where there's a central government, but as long as the taxes are coming in, you guys can run your own local affairs however you want. I've never seen an empire that's been able to have both a Christian and an Islamic civilization in it. I could be corrected on that. I haven't.
Yeah, no, there's no.
I'm studying canon law, but
there's no examples. All we have are instances where one side or the other is tolerant of visitors, basically, right? Or even of people living there. But the bottom line is. And this is actually a problem that we have. The bottom line is, in those systems, though, there's a strict sort of class outline, right? And so the people who aren't part of the religion don't have the same rights. And not that I'm against class systems, because boy, that's not the case. But they have to be dealt with carefully, and to use them across religious lines is completely against Anglo-Cathodoxy for sure. Like that
certainly
would not
since
be...
1965.
No. They didn't split anything up. I mean, that was this is basic gospel stuff. Like they didn't split anything up that way ever. Not along religious and belief lines. They split it up along church class lines, right? But the government stuff was never, because it's render under Caesar, the government stuff was never split off. Now, there have been governments that split things off on religious lines, but there's nothing within. Now, within almost every other religion, there's stuff that splits off within religious lines. Like this is really bad in India, for example. Like in India, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Because they have many class systems. Basically, they have like 5 or 6 class systems. And it's they have many class systems. So like Hinduism has class systems that has nothing to do with the birth class system. They're apart. But when they combine, things get bad. Things get really bad.
That's
like
a lot of information to track.
And you're born bad under Hinduism, you're kind of screwed. Your life is just going to be tough, and there's no way out. Whereas, it particularly in the rise of Christendom, that was the. I mean, that's the opposite of the message, right? Just anybody can rise to any position. We'll say within the religious hierarchy, that's not a problem. because we determine the religious hierarchy is determined by fruits. So like it's it's not only by fruits, but it's determined primarily by fruits, and so that's a very different system from any system that's been come up with before, because all the systems before were by birth or worth, and worth was always determined by force, and that was it, right?
Mhm.
And so now force wasn't always physical force, but it was nearly always physical force.
Mhm.
So if you were particularly charismatic, that could be force, right? Because it's the force of we'll say personal influence or something. But this whole idea that's not the thing, that it's fruits, and then fruits is an abstraction, of course. It's like, oh wow, that's all new. Like there's nothing else like that anywhere.
Slightly off topic, but I wanted to just mention the going back to the Battle of Vienna. I think that's actually where Europe got coffee and the croissant, which is very fun because the thing about the invading army is that they were all hopped up on caffeine, and which they had actually taken from the Christian Ethiopians, but Europe didn't have access to that. And so it wound up being, I think the Pope at the time actually wound up, in a certain sense, baptizing coffee, and said, well, why should the devil be the only one that has this drink, or something like that?
Mhm.
And then when the battle turned and the Europeans won, as a celebration, they called like the chief baker of the city to come up with some celebratory pastry, and he came up with the croissant, which is the Ottoman crescent flag.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're eating our enemies for breakfast.
Yeah.
And then coffee and tea become popular lunchtime beverages in England, rather than the light beers that they had been consuming. And since they were boiled, you were less likely to get sick from it. And so then when they stopped having beer for lunch and they started having tea and coffee for lunch, they had a minor economic boom. Every workman and every clerk in England was just a little bit more productive after that, when they weren't having a lager with lunch. So
well, and the problem is you can't make proper croissants or scones in the U.S. unless you buy European style butter. People don't know that. They try to reproduce the flavor and they can't do it. It's the butter, guys. It's the butter. You buy butter from New Zealand. That's the same stuff. But
what makes it better?
it's a different amount of cream, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually churned differently, and so it's different content of the good stuff in it, much higher percentage. Our butter's kind of cheap and thin and lame comparatively, but it just turns out that when you have the right concentration, it lightens up the food considerably, so you can make the light fluffy croissants and scones that are just right and not a little too heavy.
Interesting. I've always liked Irish butter, so I didn't know why, but it's got that nice yellow color to it. And
well, what do you think causes that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very anti-fragile. But anti-fragility, like if you want to be an anti-fragile person, the things under your body, in your body, are anti-fragile. But if you want to be an anti-fragile person, you need to be in a structure. So that's how that works.
Not just like having a schedule for your day, but like a structure that's bigger than you, right?
Right. I mean, you need a schedule for your day too. That is
yes, absolutely.
But you also need to have people that can help you, like pick you up when you fall, sort of thing, because you will. That's gonna happen. Especially, and I've seen this a lot. This happens a lot with people online. They do the efficiency thing, especially like the gym bros and stuff, and they just wreck themselves. They destroy themselves every 3 to 8 months, roughly speaking, with pretty good regularity. And then they always find some correlation and go, oh, I see what I did wrong. And they try again. And it's like, dude, I've been doing this for like 4 years, every 3 3 to 8 months, you crash like clockwork.
So is it like a too strict a regimen without enough flex in it, or
if you are trying to be that efficient, there are already a bunch of things wrong, right? So you can look at somebody trying to structure their life that heavily as an individual, like they're filtered out from being cooperative, because if you overstructure your life, you don't have time
for something spontaneous.
To stop and deal with other people, like I did the other day, and I got in trouble and almost died. I'm not eating up this food again. Get out here. I'm like, okay, I gotta go. If you want any help from me in the future, I have to go eat dinner now. Otherwise, I'm gonna die. So, or Layman Zerga can attest. I almost said Castle, but your name is actually Layman Zerga now.
Yeah.
I didn't see Ocean's 13, so.
Well, here's another little bit of anti-fragility, in the Bible all the way. It's like you've got 6 days to do work, and on the 7th day you got to rest, right?
That's right.
And it's like, you don't have that perfect efficiency right there,
That's right.
And back when we had a proper society, we didn't let things be open on Sunday,
right,
unless it was like a very necessary thing, and there was like a few exceptions for that, but those were understood as exceptions and not the normal thing. But if your life is so highly structured that you can't respond to changes, then you just got to get bowled over,
Well, you might be able to, but the problem is you can't respond to the sorts of changes that happen in the real world. You can only respond to the ones that you think you can predict, which is fine because you can predict a bunch, but the number of changes you can predict is tiny compared to the number of possible changes. It's statistical reality at some layer. And so what happens to those people is, because they don't have, and think of how upgraded Jonathan Peugeot's remainder is once you understand anti-fragile. They don't have the remainder. And so where does the pressure go? Well, it blows up the system because there's no remainder for it to go into. It's like, so
it's sort of like, if you absolutely cannot afford to be sick ever because your life will fall apart.
Oh no,
that's a bad way to live.
No, you can plan 3 days of sickness a month, Father. That's easy. I can do that. That's no problem. Right. Now you see the problem, right? When you try to predict the remainder and not leave it a remainder, you're anti-fragile. You think you're not because you're planning to be anti-fragile. It's like you can't plan to be anti-fragile. That already excludes the ability for you to be anti-fragile.
That reminds me of, so there was a guy who was sort of like one of the the gun YouTubers. He passed away, I think, at the beginning of this year, Paul Harrell. But he had like a long running channel, and he would do a lot of like bushcraft stuff and things like that. And he was like a military firearms instructor and all these things. But he'd tell these really cool, like long form stories while doing like Thanksgiving cookouts out in the field and stuff. And one of the things that he would talk about is, you get these people that try to do, put together like their survival pack for when they go out camping and how they're going to do it perfectly. And the whole thing that he focused on was that they always say, they would criticize what he actually had, and he knew his gear and he tested it and all these things. They'd say, but what I'm gonna put together my bag, and it's gonna have, all of this great stuff that's better than yours. And all these things. And then it turned out that, they actually didn't have anything. Or they were still in the middle of, or they just had it in like their shopping list on Amazon or something like that. They didn't have it. If they did have it, they hadn't even tested it yet or whatever. But it's like, don't worry, they're gonna do it.
It's still in the plastic packaging.
Yeah. And it's like, I've had this too, where it's like, you check people and it's like, hey, can we cooperate on this thing? Trying to like start this particular bit of work, and they say no, like we don't want to join you doing it because we're gonna do it. And that was 2 years ago. They're still gonna do it. They haven't yet. I'm just going to let you know, but that's the thing, is that if the time comes that you actually need to provide that service and you just don't have it, or you don't, maybe you do have the materials, but you haven't actually practiced with it or anything, then it's like, what stability are you actually providing, not just to yourself, but for the people who are kind of counting on you, because they know that you're going to do it, or that you said that you have it. So clearly you must be able to provide the service,
Yeah. What is that? A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was like, well, I actually have this, and here it is, versus what you're like. Yeah, potentiality has more reality, or actuality has more reality than potentiality.
Yep.
Because the potential might exist, but it currently doesn't. So,
and it also might not exist.
Yeah,
with a non-zero chance, whereas the actuality exists.
There it is.
I had a really stupid pun that I'm going to do again from the Language of Creation book club, that about taking responsibility and how like it's better to just suffer the thing now. That a burden in the hand is better than two in the bush. I still maintain that, and I did it because Mark reacted so much the first time that I couldn't help but do it again.
These are my friends, Father. Oh,
hey, with friends like these, you'll definitely be anti-fragile.
Exactly.
Come up with some primordial statement about reality just to piss me off. Yeah.
No, with friends like these, you'll definitely be anti-fragile.
It's meta friendship.
Yeah.
Meta friend. Meta friendship. Do you have a meta friend? We could start a whole online thing for sure.
Oh, man.
Imagine if we used our powers for evil, Castle. What would happen?
I don't have to imagine. I've just done it twice.
Well, yeah, but we could do it for real on the internet, like the TikToks and stuff. Could get this really rolling.
No, that's fine. I've had enough.
You've had your fill of evil.
Yeah,
glutted yourself.
I only do 2 shows a night. It's
perfect.
I heard a interesting thing recently is that, and maybe it's complete nonsense, but it stuck with me. This idea that procrastination was a way of holding on to the idea that you still have potential, and you just haven't actualized it yet. So it's like, absolutely, I could, learn how to play the guitar and become a rock star. Like I've got everything that I need to do that. I just haven't done it. The thing is that when I've procrastinated, I've never actually thought that. But I guess if I thought that I wouldn't procrastinate anymore, because it's a really depressing thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not about what you will say think consciously.
Yeah.
It's more about how your brain actually works. And part of the problem with conversation in general is it exemplifies a rationalized way of thinking that is mediated and filtered through your conscious mind. And so it seems like most of what people do is conscious. But like Freud and Jung knew very well, which is why I think a bunch of people should be imprisoned who claim to have psychology degrees. All the magic is unconscious or subconscious. All of it. The conscious stuff is all affectation from that. And the fact that like Peterson doesn't mention that actually really bothers me. Like he knows better for sure. Don't
get me started on Peterson again. Come on.
Yeah. I mean,
grossly unfair. Grossly unfair.
Watch the book club.
We've been doing 8 to 9 hours a week.
While you're talking about Peterson, have you seen that famous question when he was asked, because he loves his Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and I studied in my history. I've got all Solzhenitsyn book. Nobel laureate 1970 for literature. The question was, have you read 200 Years Together? Have you seen the reaction?
No.
Google it. That will tell you all about Peterson. A fake. All right? I won't go any further. It's not my channel.
I think
it's Father Eric Six.
Watch the 12 Rules
So
for Life.
that tells you everything about the man and the
No.
Daily Wire. That's
Nothing.
all I need to say.
Yeah,
Think about it.
I don't
Mind
know
boggles.
I don't know too much about what you're saying about Jim with the
well, how about this? Can I put something to you, boys and girls? There's no girls, boys. The only Nobel laureate, of course, a Russian modern thinker, spent Gulag Archipelago 10 days in the life of Ivan Desinovich, etc., etc. And the only book which is not published in English is 200 Years Together. I wonder why. Mind boggles.
Well, I guess we'll never figure it out.
Tells you a lot.
It isn't
Tells
published
you a
in
lot.
English, so I'm probably
No,
not going to read it.
but he's so prominent and tells you a lot about America today. But I won't venture that road, and that sort of goes in it. But on the other hand, you're talking about emotions and the thing. I think everything emanates from language. See, language,
not possible.
words. No, just let me. Words conjure up image. And if
they
you
can, they don't for all
if,
people.
if I say gay, 40 years ago, gay meant totally different. And there are Hollywood movies, exactly. Mm-hmm. What does gay say if I say, look at that gay
So it's not
man.
Stable. Even in people,
do you understand what I'm trying to say? What I'm trying to say, simply put, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of other examples. Any language, whether you restrict it or expand it, the people, and it's not conspiratorial theory, the people who control our language, it's evolving, continuously evolving. That's why you get, Oxford English Dictionary always accepts slang into the mainstream of language, or American English or Australian English, etc., etc. But language is so pertinent and important, the way we think it, to conjure up our image. If I want to be, rude to you, ad hominem or something, I say something really bad, it has a certain image in your mind, or you say something bad to me, or any person for that matter. You say, that sort of, and some people react differently. It's above their head. Some people will get a knife or a gun and start shooting you if you said something derogatory. But the point I'm trying to make, basically, I think language is such an important element in our perception of the reality, or the current reality which we all experience.
Well, I would definitely agree that language shapes how we see the world. But I don't. Have you read the 200 Years Alone or the Solzhenitsyn book you were referencing?
Yes, I have. Yes.
So, if it's not too heavy of a task, could you summarize it for me?
Well, I can show it to you, but you can't get it in hard copy. You've got to actually download it clandestine.
Yeah, for a summary. You didn't want to see it. Saffir-Whorf was discredited, by the way, just to let you know.
I'm sorry?
The Saffir-Whorf hypothesis is discredited. It's the hypothesis you put forth about language. It's fully discredited.
All right.
It's half correct, but again, because...
which half is correct? Which half is correct? Which half is...
get the same image.
I don't think this idea that the language is the most... And certainly language is potent, right? Just... look at the way that things work. I just made nod just by saying words. Here we are. But the way that a good Thomistic epistemology, if we want to call it that, he didn't use that word. The way that it works is that the mind experiences reality by mediation of the senses, and comes into contact with these things, and the senses are brought together into a percept in the common sense. It's not actually like a place in your brain. It's just a function that's fulfilled by a human soul. So we've got this, a primordial sense of a thing there. And then the active intellect takes its properties and ideas and what it is and how it works and all those different very subtle things to very explicit things, and presses that upon the passive intellect, and our minds conform to the reality of whatever it is that we are experiencing. And only later, after we have that concept in our head, are we able to apply a name to that concept. So it seems that as powerful as language is, and it's like if you don't have a word for something, that was kind of an Orwell thesis right there. If you took away the notion of freedom, people would have a harder time doing anything about it. Like, it certainly is connected, but I still think that reality itself and the forms of things have to have the ultimate priority. And as powerful as language is, it can only come in second place.
Well, can I use the example of Australian Aborigines? Very the traditional pre-European, and there are a lot of tribes in South America, in Amazon, in Africa, 19th century, 18th century. Aborigines, when they counting, they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and after 5 comes many. There's no need for 6, 7, 8, 10, whatever in that society. And so if we Westerners, so-called educated, blah blah blah, start talking about trigonometry or algebra, I mean, it's absurd to a person. That doesn't mean he's stupid, but in his worldview, in his culture, in his surroundings, is totally. You put me in the Simpson Desert, for example, I don't know where the water holes are, and they're nomadic. How to hunt? I'll die in 3 days.
What does that have to do with language?
What I'm trying to say, language, language is important because words, when I say language, words conjure up an image. So if you haven't got a word for it, my argument is, if you haven't got a word, or you control words, language, you expand it or reduce it, you control the thought, the ability to think
that's
outside the box.
We know it's backwards. There's plenty of testing that proves that it's backwards.
So let's imagine we take your Australian Aboriginal countrymen. Let's put them in some sort of situation, right, where they would actually have a need for numbers more than 5, right? And it's some kind of teamwork thing. We've got some assurance that they have a motivation for this. I bet you we would be able to teach them our numbers.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that.
Easily. Yeah,
I am not arguing that. But if I'm the ruler, hypothetically, I'm the king. I'm the autocrat. If I want to control them, I never expose them to mathematics.
I mean, I think it'd just be easier to give them a bunch of sugary food and TVs to control them. But
well, now we talk about 21st century. So what I'm transferring in our modern society, there are different forms of control. I mean, we know for example, all know buzzwords. If I want to, the left, now in terms of politics, what are the buzzwords the left uses all the time? They want to degrade you, ostracize you, demote you, or whatever. We all know.
Jim, it doesn't work.
Yes,
in the US, if you tell somebody something, the odds are, and this has been tested, they will not do it. So word control in the US is completely worthless. And that's actually what the left found out, because they own the media, and it didn't work. And it continues to fail, and they continue to try it. And all they did was destroy the media. They've destroyed all of Hollywood because they believe your theory is correct. And the theory is so wrong that they've lost hundreds of millions of dollars because it doesn't work. It's that simple.
Doesn't work. Languages, I mean, we going all over
your
the place.
thesis about control with language doesn't work. It doesn't
not
work
the
for
only
a number of reasons. No,
my thesis, one of the greatest way of controlling any society, any person, any community.
Wrong.
Whatever cultural level they are,
it's wrong.
Is if you can have a monopoly or influence on the language.
It doesn't work. Argument. They just tried it in the US. They tried it with COVID. It didn't work. It actually completely failed.
What did I say? What did I say about if you?
So can we say it just didn't work 100%? Like some people would buy into it.
It didn't even work 30%. So, for example, if you were in the
What?
South, if you were in
What?
the South,
What?
90 days and our
What?
restaurants were reopened. In New
What?
England, they had restaurants closed for 2 years. Now, and that wasn't all of New England. It was most of the New England cities and towns, but it wasn't all of them. All the Republican ones, by the way, opened their restaurants early.
What did
right?
Fauci call if you didn't take the jab? What did he call you? What derogatory names did he call you? Come on.
It didn't work, Jim. They keep trying it.
What?
They're still trying it,
The
right?
point is language.
Work. It didn't
Words.
work. It didn't work, dude.
If I may, I don't necessarily know much about the Catholic theology on language, but the way I see it, just from my personal perspective, is that there's two components to it. So I think language does influence how people see the world, but I believe it. So
Can.
sorry, Jim is right in one sense, but I believe there is sort of an inbuilt cognitive capacity for human beings to acquire a new language. So the way that
It's based on
linguists
language.
know 'em-
Your
so the
cognitive
way-
ability, your cognitive
it's not.
abilities,
Well,
the way
so it's-
your
But
imagination,
Jim,
It can't be.
your
It can't
natural
be.
science or social
Well,
science,
Language
writing
comes
a
after
novel.
cognition.
It
It has
is
to.
so important about language.
I
You take
haven't.
away the language, you're gone.
Yeah, I haven't. So I haven't read him, but I've heard that the American linguist Noam Chomsky basically says that humans
Oh,
have
that
an
guy!
inbuilt,
Oh my God!
cognitive capacity to generate new language from these a priori cognitive structures, whereas the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein says that
I've got his
basically
books.
language
Yeah.
is more contingent on historical meaning. And I would say that there's a sense in which both sides are right. I think there is an a priori cognitive capacity to acquire language, but I think Chomsky goes too far by saying that this is like a universal thing. I think I would agree more with Wittgenstein that a lot of the specific way that language manifests is socio-historically contingent.
Right, and they're using a second order abstraction, right? And so language as such, yes, individual language does not have the effects that Jim describes, and that's well studied. It's studied in psychology, it's studied in neuroscience, it's been studied in all the social sciences. It doesn't work. It's that simple. It doesn't map for lots of reasons. So the primary reason it doesn't work is because language is not universal at all. Not everybody conjures images from language at all. And that percentage may be relatively low. Nobody really knows. There's a lot of argument over that. But
So,
for example, you can't use highfalutin words like 2-cent Harvard words
all right,
with
let's
people who live in the streets.
Mark,
because
let's
they
mute
can't-
everyone. Let's mute all of us here. Let's communicate. Come on, put the mute like Layman did.
I
Come on,
can't-
I'll
I
put it
can't-
on.
I can't
I'll
communicate
put
to
it
you,
on,
Jim.
and let's talk.
You're making
Let's talk.
absurd statements.
Yeah, nobody here is saying that language is unimportant, right? And obviously, you can cause a lot of ruckus with language.
Right.
St. James says that the tongue is a burning fire, and it can burn the whole world down. And if a man doesn't control his tongue, then he's self-deceived, and his worship is pointless, right? So none of us are sitting here saying that you could just tell lies willy-nilly or try and deceive or fool people like that. And I'll even say that sometimes your lies and your distortions of language can trap people if they look at you as an authority, and the guy in the white lab coat says this, and it's actually untrue, and it's an abusive language. Then a fair number of people might just believe the guy in the white lab coat and go a little nuts as a result. But this idea that just because somebody is distorting information, telling a lie, trying to change the language, that they're going to have like a magic power over everybody is just a little too far. Like, human beings don't have that much control over each other. So they can certainly try, and they will have a certain modicum of success depending on their skill and maybe other things that I don't really need to list out right now. But it's never going to be, perfectly controlled. So
a good example is the American example. Remember those riots 4 or 5 years ago in America I think BLM, and they were burning cities and so forth. And there was a CNN reporter, was night, I think it was Seattle, one of those, radical cities, and everything with cars were burning and all that. And the reporter, she said, look, it's mostly a peaceful. Mostly a peaceful protest,
Right. And look at you,
let me finish. And behind, this is the,
the fire behind
cognitive dissonance is there were people fighting, burning smoke, and
CNN almost went out of business after that, Jim.
But so what? Who's arguing profit or loss? You're typical capitalist. It's not about CNN. So what are you trying to say?
Eventually, go out of business like Hollywood did.
No, majority of people who watch CNN, the boomers, believed it.
No, the majority of people who watch that did not believe that.
You don't, and most of us probably don't.
Of audience.
Well, why they continue watching?
About?
So, what I'm trying to say is if you haven't got, it's not the only component. But I think our reality, and all the language is very specialized. Medical and legal, usually it's all Latin or theology, Christianity. Any trade, any astronomy, whatever. Biology's got its own language, and it's very, very, very complicated, complex, especially something which is.
You need language for cooperation. That's true. Cooperation is facilitated by communication.
They use that. They use that perfect to keep it sort of within a shop. It is a
obviously jargon.
All the language in the world is not going to help you. Period.
For example, the other spectrum of being non-educated, as I understand, listening to American blacks, for example, in the ghetto, and I cannot really understand. It's English, sort of semi-English, but
that was my earlier point. Is not
the point, but the language is. I know that. My point is their concept, because when they talk and their words, their sentences does not correlate with my understanding what they are saying.
So they can't manipulate you with it, and you can't manipulate them with your language either.
No,
that was my earlier point.
But
it doesn't work.
Exactly.
It's a nice theory,
but there is a mainstream of all right. I'll give you an example. Okay. Patriarchy. Very popular word.
I am the patriarchy.
Yeah. Okay. You mean Father Eric over here?
All right, patriarchy. Well, that word and what it connotes was not around 30, 40 years ago. Yes or no? Oh, the meaning of it.
Sure. Obviously we had the word the patriarch.
So no, you don't. What I'm trying to say is the other meaning, the modern meaning of patriarch.
The connotation has changed. The denotation has not. That's standard for most words in the language, which is another reason why you have to be wrong, by the way, because the language changes in that way, where the denotative meaning and the connotative meaning spread out. And when they spread out too much, what happens is typically, all this is well studied, right? What happens is typically a new word is formed, right? And because the original denotation gets modified, okay? Now, we have formed too many words. And so what happened in the United States in particular, but in all the English-speaking world, is that
the whole world,
because we already have way too many words, unlike German, which has compound words, so that those don't really count, right? People can't remember them. So it's a Tower of Babel situation. And and you end up with the blacks in the ghetto speaking a completely different brand of English that you and I do not understand, right? Which means they may still be speaking English, but we can't communicate to them anymore in that way using language, which is I have no problem with any of this.
It's
normal.
But it
happened. It's real.
I was gonna ask Jim, because I would definitely agree with you. The way language can be manipulated, it depends on the context. And I was curious. I can't
exactly. That's my point. Basically,
I can't speak Russian. So, for example, I can't read whatever the Solzhenitsyn book you were.
Hey, Kurt. I don't. I think we've moved on past that one. I'm not interested in pursuing it any further. I was just on the track with something. Jim, we're
Yeah.
talking about the people who are trying to manipulate language, who are telling blatant falsehoods, who are basically distorting, are attempting to distort other people's perceptions of reality by using language in a intentionally confusing and disturbed way. Are they building their house on rock, or are they building their house on sand?
Well, they are built. Eventually, it's sand, but that's not the point. That's why civilization come and go, governments come and go. Whether it's our rotten so-called democracy, I shall laugh. Democracy, the rotten, the decadent democracy, or whether it's North Korean dictatorship. Nothing which is not veritas, which is not the truth, whether it's our personal belief, family, or the country, or the politics, or culture, will not last. Absolutely.
I have the same belief.
If it has not got sound foundations, it cannot last. And thus, getting back,
I have the same belief in the truth that you do, right? I think so, we're lined up on this. I'm convinced that all of these demented minds who are trying to distort and control the language are building their house on sand, and it's all going to wash away when the Lord chooses to let his rain shine, flood the area.
Yeah,
and we need to be built on the rock, and we need to not be afraid. We need to pray the rosary and not be anxious.
Exactly.
I believe, was that St. Augustine who talked about this idea of divine illuminating reason? I've heard that attributed to St. Augustine, the idea that basically our capacity to reason...
he was deeply influenced by Plotinus before converting to Christianity, and found a lot of the Platonic thought that had themes of enlightenment in it. So I don't know if he ever wrote about that specifically, but it kind of fits, and especially the way he talks about the Lord enlightening him in his darkness. But he talks about it in terms of grace, right? That it's a gift given to you by God. That's more important to him, I think, than some sort of ascetic pursuit of enlightenment.
That's what I say every day. Thank the Lord I was born a Catholic. I mean, that is because of that 2,000 years of foundation. And it was, if it was founded on lie, it wouldn't last 200. And look at the empires. I mean, the British Empire lasted for 200. The Roman Empire, what about 3rd century, 2 centuries, 4 or 5 centuries. It collapsed. That's in terms of politics, but look at Catholicism, not Christian, Catholicism. I love that.
I'm a big fan too, as it turns out. Yeah.
The divine illumination of reason is a philosophical and theological theory stating that human beings require supernatural assistance.
We call that grace.
Divine light to grasp truths. Yes, that is
Sounds
true.
like St. Augustine was onto something. I mean, I don't. Yeah. I haven't read the Confessions, but I hear he was a pretty cool guy.
You just need to make sure there's one really bad English translation out there. It was done in like the 1860s, and you need to avoid that one because it will make reading St. Augustine absolutely painful for you. So just make sure you've got a more modern translation. Most of the rest of the ones are much better than I can't remember the name of the guy who did the awful one, but the problem is that's the one they sell you for 50 cents on a Kindle store. So,
I mean, and one of the things with these things about like these conversations about language is I think one of the problems that I think should come up in these conversations about how people manipulate is this problem of how the internet has basically atomized people in the sense that it used to be that people found cultivation of meaning in pre-modern times primarily through religious institutions, but now with modernity and especially with the internet, basically atomization has happened, and I believe that atomization makes manipulation easier because I believe manipulation is easier when people can't cooperate because they don't have a shared system of values like they did in pre-modern times.
Absolutely. Like absolutely the atomization does make you like if you think that you can figure things out all on yourself, that you don't need any help, then you are so easy to manipulate, right?
It's Descartes. Descartes did it.
Which edition of St. Augustine's City of God are you talking about? His
We were talking about the Confessions.
Right. What?
I could. It was some guy. His last name started with the letter W. It was published in the 1850s or 1860s, and it was just a really awful translation. It was the first one I ever tried to read, and I just thought I didn't like Augustine. And then, like, I got Sister Maria Bolding's translation, in the Ignatius Critical version. It's got some wonderful essays in there, and good and helpful notes as well. And
Ignatius Press.
Ignatius Press. Yeah, they've got a critical edition of the. And I was like, oh my gosh, Augustine's amazing. I just really picked the wrong translation that first time around, and it was awful. I couldn't even follow the plot, and his life isn't that complicated, you know. But with a proper translation, it really does come alive. So
the indication that I have, so Rachel Fulton Brown does the Mosaic Arc podcast and YouTube channel. Episode 145, which came out on Friday. She does her live streams right after I do mine, actually. How Isaac Newton wrecked Western civilization using one weird trick, which is absolutely true. That's what led me, listening to that, led me to, it's Newton and Descartes. Descartes does individualism with, I think, therefore I am, and Newton does objective material reality. And when they said it, I went, oh, why didn't I notice this before? It was so clear. But she didn't notice it either. They're all reading books about this stuff. So once you sort of realize that if you're trying to be an individual, or you're even trying to be more individuated than you will say can be as a person, what ends up happening is you're an NPC. You're subject to all this manipulation that you can't avoid and can't see because you can't avoid it, right? Like you can't see it, you can't avoid it. It's happening to you anyway. You're caught in it. And then you will believe the guy with the fire behind him saying mostly peaceful protests, which already
the guy on
doesn't make
TV
any
said
sense
it.
in the language. Like if language were so powerful, the good news about these people is if you are actually really good with language, you can tell they're speaking gobbledygook. The problem is most people suck at language, and that's actually why they're able to manipulate them. And so when you listen to a guy like Sam Harris, people are fooled by him very easily because they don't realize what he's saying is gobbledygook.
This explains so much why the world is moved by small groups, right? Because it's like people just look to authorities to sort these things out for them, right?
Well, and small groups are more cohesive. Mm-hmm. And so because they're more cohesive and usually they're more determined because they're small, so they kind of have to be, they have more momentum. And then they're like, wow, look, these 10 people are doing more than all of these online gamers. Yeah, they are. Well, maybe I should follow them, right? Now, you don't rationalize it because mimicry just happens. So you automatically mimic it. And then it just, boom, you're done, right? And this happened. So this is what's happening in AI right now. So in AI right now, people are going, yep, George, the CEO of blah, blah, blah company, who may or may not even be in my industry, it's just a CEO I know, his product has AI. My product should have AI. I'm going to buy some AI. Like that happens in business all the time. I used to watch this all the time in the Fortune 500s. That just one Fortune 500 company would do something and then everybody would copy it. And my favorite example is, so I forget when what year it was, but it was either in the late 80s or early 90s. IBM, which is like IBM built the entire computer industry, unbeknownst to pretty much everybody. But like the whole thing starts with them, chips, all of it, it's all IBM, as it turns out. And they decide to do this experiment called outsourcing, and they decide to hire a bunch of people in India and outsource some of their development. They run the experiment for 6 months, decide it's not worth it, and never touch it again. Everybody copied that model, even though it was thoroughly unsuccessful, and IBM basically threw it out immediately because they actually test things. They're the smart Fortune 500 company, not in all ways, but in that way they certainly were. And so what ended up happening was we had decades, maybe still, of outsourcing going on in all kinds of tech industries. And outsourcing was on balance an utter catastrophe for the industry. It was utterly catastrophist for everybody. It was just horrible. It's very hard to get outsourcing to work. There are some notable exceptions, but 99% of people who did outsourcing, and this has been studied, complete disaster, total waste of money, usually destroyed entire companies. That's usually what happens with outsourcing.
No, I would simply say, again, I sort of started off with talking about language. I'm not a linguist by any stretch. My mum was a linguist, but anyway, contemporary example would be is what's happening in Middle East. I won't mention anything any further. And you watch the media and what's going on there, despite there's no reporters allowed in the so-called troubled fighting 45 square miles.
Yeah, well, Ukraine.
Well, that's a battle between no, that's a battle between two nations with got arms and fighting each other.
That's a battle between people fighting Nazis, actual Nazis, who happen to be Russian, and actual Nazis who happen to be Ukrainian.
There you are, sir.
Right, and that's why you never see
what I'm challenging all of you. I've also written to my Archbishop Anthony Fisher here and Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister, who's, as I already said, an old boy, know him quite well. St. Mary's Cathedral, Christian Brothers, Edmund Rice tradition, an old boy of my school, which I'm not proud at all. But anyway, that's another story. What is happening? Is it ethnic cleansing? Is it retribution? Is it a war crime? Or is it a genocide? Everybody's afraid, and the silence, What? I'm not asking to get up and start fighting and demonstrate. I'm not trying to make anybody agitate. What I'm really pissed off about this world, call me sarcastic, call me whatever, is that silent kills, that non-committal. Oh, look, mate, it's too hard. Nothing to see here. Go away. That's what's happening in real time as we speak. Now, I'm not a lover of Islam. I'm a Catholic. But they're human beings. They're children. They're innocent. And they're being killed like cats and dogs. No reporter allowed.
Okay,
There's
Jim.
about 200 reporters. And that is travesty of justice.
You've made your made your statement for the live stream now.
Foster, may I make my statement for the live stream?
I'm kind of getting done with statements here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Here we are.
It affects me.
Yeah.
Personally.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't.
Like, well, it does. We're talking veritas. We're talking truth, and there's so many lies. We're talking about language not being used.
We were talking about anti-fragility. You were talking about all that stuff. We were talking about anti-fragile, which is the world, because the good part about the world is that even though all of the stuff you described has been going on every single year of my life, and every single year of the life of every single other person I've ever read about, none of this is new. It's kind of a constant, actually. Everything's okay. Like, I'm fine. We have an incredibly anti-fragile culture overall. And the fact that bad things are happening in the world somewhere right now is not new or interesting, actually. And I can't pay attention to most of it. Heaven forfend anybody ever start looking at the continent of Africa and the various, quote, countries there and figuring out what's been going on there all the time and still going on. Like, what are we going to do then? I mean, if you're tweaked out about whatever the hell's happening this week in the Middle East, which has been going on since at least the first act of the Great War came to an end, if not slightly before, or whatever the hell's going on, around the Russian area, because that place hasn't been stable in my entire life. So, like, Like whatever's happening in Ukraine isn't even new. First of all, that war happened 10 years before everybody says it did. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't care. Like, that's great. There's nothing I can do about it. The
Yes,
world
there
is
is.
very anti-fragile,
Well,
and
well,
everything will be fine.
Well, you're not, well, it's not so much Australian, but I'm talking about specifically about you being all Americans living in America. Your dollar, taxpayers' dollar, is you're part of, you're complicit in whatever is going on in Ukraine and in the Middle East.
I'm pretty sure that the average
No.
American has no idea what its government is up to on its behalf.
Well, that's
Yeah,
not an
I
excuse.
don't-
That may be so, but that's
Yeah.
not ignorance is no excuse.
Look, we were sent
beg to
Ron
differ.
Paul, and we were not worthy of him.
That's right.
And now we're facing our chastisement.
That's
like,
right. Yeah. Chastising the normal people is only going to make us kill you. Don't do that. Because we will. Like, we
no,
shoot
I'm
people, man.
not going to kill
You can't
anybody.
come
I'd
over
rather be
here now.
martyred. I
You
just want to
can't
be
come
clear
over.
about
You
that.
came over
Mark
here.
is the
You
one who's
went to
talking about
Texas
killing.
and talk like that. You wouldn't go back. Why are you antagonizing people who don't even believe what you're saying, whether it's true or not? That's not going to be good for you. Don't do that. You're just making everything worse by indicting people who may or may not know anything about what you're talking about.
Well, isn't this all about the truth or
No,
possibility
it's not.
of a truth?
No, none of this was about the truth. You're making it about what you want to be true because you want to indict people who don't even believe what you believe
But
in
doesn't
your
mean
belief
it-
system
But
because you
doesn't-
think it's going to make
But
a
it
change in
does
the world.
not. But you believe in falsity. That doesn't mean that the truth does not exist.
You don't know what I believe. You can't.
No,
make
I
that
mean,
claim.
so I
You
didn't-
made a bunch of claims that are definitely false.
Well, in your mind, that's your prerogative. I respect that.
Oh, it's my prerogative, but
Of
it's
course
not
it
your
is.
prerogative.
Yeah, but
Well, under what authority are you making that claim?
I've made a claim, a general claim, not ad hominem claim of
You're
anybody.
indicting all Americans for a
Exactly.
crime that you
Well,
imagine.
you are
in your
complicit.
head.
America is complicit. But how much?
Complicit for
All
what
the
are you
arms.
talking
Where
about?
where all the arms go? Ukraine and Middle East. Where are all the arms? Where did they get all the rockets, etc., etc.? Tell me. Is it Upper Mongolia? Oh no, I don't think so. Is it Chile? No, it's not. Is it Patagonia in south of Argentina? No,
They
it's
didn't
not.
buy any arms from Australia.
Ah,
Joe? You sure about that?
Well,
Sure, none of
Australia.
those countries have Australian weapons.
Yeah. But see, this is
They do. Oh, really? Oh,
plead.
no.
Look
So
at
you
this.
have to
Look at
indict
this.
your.
Sharing.
Since your country
Sharing.
is at least as guilty as
No,
mine.
I'm
Why
not
don't you
arguing
pick
that.
your country?
Exactly.
Everybody. Father Eric stream again. Here we are. I do not live in Israel, nor do I live in the Ukraine. I do not have much personal stake or investment in any of these war-torn areas on a personal level, because I happen to live in the United States of America and I can't control where it is that I'm born. Everybody who is mediating information to you, everybody who's in the media is by definition mediating information to you. They're not doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They're not just doing it because they're nice people. They are doing it because they want you to know something. But we could look at somebody like Bishop Barron, right? You know, maybe he's actually a conniving psychopath who just wants to be famous, right? Like, I've never met the guy. I haven't seen the way he treats his secretaries. You know, I don't know, right? But, you know, maybe he is just passionately in love with our Lord and wishes to make him known, and happens to have rid a wave of success as a blessing by God. And as far as I can tell, he's generally using his gifts very well. So his whole media endeavor is not without some sort of motivation. His whole media effort and endeavor has a reason behind it. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because I dang well think he's earned it. I think he is doing everything he's doing with the word on fire because he believes in what he preaches. And all available evidence is that he believes what he preaches. And so he is using the tools of media in order to try and spread the gospel message. That is what is going on. That's one individual looking at one media corporation here. The bigger these media corporations get, the more money is involved, the more friends they have in powerful positions of government and business, the more difficult it becomes to sort out who's telling the truth in the media. I don't have a magical mind reading capacity to sort this out myself. I don't have the time to go and figure out and follow the money, follow the personalities, study the CEOs. I don't necessarily have time for all of that to do. And even if I did, I might not actually be able to figure out the motivations of everybody who's in the media. I think it is basically a settled, truth we could hold in common here, that there are people in the media whose motivations are not entirely pure, that they may have a certain agenda, they may have certain things that they prefer to report on, and certain things that they decline to report on, because all acts of journalism are moral acts. As a human being deciding to report one thing over another, right? You can't report all of the news in the world. That would be impossible. So you have to decide to report what you want. So I've basically gotten to the point where I trust very little of the news. And I think, these news media outlets, they have a vested interest in keeping your attention because they're all funded by advertising. And advertising has been so far the only successful funding model for mass media operations. And so whatever they could do to keep their, your eyeballs on them, that's going to be the best thing for their bottom line and their businesses. And so if they don't have a good bottom line, if they don't have a profit, then they don't continue to be in business. They go out of business. One of the ways that a media attention can continue to show you ads is by keeping you angry and anxious. If they can keep you angry and anxious, then your attention remains with them, because anxious things will always draw your attention. If there is a Japanese killer hornet in the room, you're not going to listen to Father Eric's monologue very closely. You're going to have your attention focused on that giant hornet there. So there's these media companies have a vested interest in reporting bad news to you, in keeping you anxious, and asking you and keeping your attention and showing you ads that way. Which is why, as a matter of pastoral guidance and wisdom, I often tell people to not pay attention to the news. And that's because the news is going to show them the most sensational and anxiety-inducing things in order to keep their attention. Maybe that's not every news story. I happen to be a fan of Pillar Catholic. They do excellent reporting, but that's like, 10 people maybe in that whole organization. So a very small organization. They can be a little bit more cohesive, as was discussed earlier. Which leads me to the discussions that we've been having for the past hour or so on this live stream. A lot of it focusing on news stories that are not happening anywhere near to us, that we have no personal investment in, we have no skin in the game on these various news stories. And yet we're continually bombarded by them, right? We never hear on the mainstream news outlets about massacres of Christians in Africa. Right? We never hear about, the massacres that take place in the northern part of Nigeria or the Democratic Republic of the Congo, bombings happening in Malaysia, those sorts of things. Now that should be news, right? I mean, a bombing of a church, if you've got like a good video of that should really grab onto people's attention, but there's different forces and there's different powers behind the news and the different media outlets' attempts to hack our attention here. All of that to say, I don't trust any of them, really. None of the big ones, anyway. The only ones I can trust, Pillar Catholic. I'm only 1 degree separated from them. Our chancellor in our diocese went to canon law school with those guys, so I can trust them because I can trust him, and he trusts these guys. And it seems to me to be a waste of time for a bunch of people, talking heads on the internet, to try and litigate these things where we have no skin in the game, I'm going to go to bed tonight in a perfectly safe place in the middle of the United States of America. I certainly pray for peace constantly, and I think that's the most useful contribution that I can make. But I don't know what to do about the Middle East. I just don't. It's a big, complicated problem. I'm not there. I don't speak any of the languages, and God has given me a different task in his world. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. And with that, it's dark outside, and I think we're going to call the stream as it is. So go to Mass, go to confession, pray the rosary, don't skip leg day. Good night, and God bless you all.